good men are not wired and do not have it in them to gaslight, which is why it's so difficult to understand, because you don't have that experience of yourself in relationships. Hello, I'm Karen Seitz, and this is the Happy Wife School. This podcast is for married women to realize that we are responsible for our happiness, that no one and no thing can make us happy, and that our husbands are not the source of our unhappiness. In each episode, I red pill married women to know that we are the problem in our marriages to good men. For the good men, this podcast will wake you up to the realities of your wife's woman ways, to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to her emasculation in a constructive, caring way. Before we dive into today's episode, a couple reminders. My message is meant for common and usual marital issues. My podcast is not intended for abusive, violent, or compulsive behaviors in a marriage that are threatening or dangerous. Also, please take a second to visit my website and learn more about my courses, which offer solutions for married women and good men. You can find the link in the description below. With all that being said, let's get started. We are talking about gaslighting inside the mind of your wife. So to start this off is really important, just right off the bat, a reminder, as I talk about gaslighting in today's topic, it's important to remember gaslighting is a common woman way behavior that women do and good men experience in a normal marriage. Remember, as women, we have these issues on a spectrum. And so I am not talking about the extremes in a violently abusive or narcissistic relationship. I'm talking about normal, common, everyday issues. And gaslighting is a tool of emasculation, which I talk about frequently, that is used to break down a good man so that we can take the control and power in a relationship. It can be difficult to realize that gaslighting is a common behavior in normal marriages, but it is. It is not uncommon. It is not rare, and we will get more into that as we continue. And the reason I want to talk about this today is that good men have a difficult time understanding gaslighting. It is very common through the week as I talk with men who reach out that say, can you help me understand gaslighting? You use that term a lot, and I have a really hard time understanding it and seeing where and how my wife does it, although I know it's happening, but I have a really hard time really grasping it and making sense of it. The reason for that is because good men are not wired and do not have it in them to gaslight, which is why it's so difficult to understand, because you don't have that experience of yourself in relationships. Whereas women will often accuse, and again, we're talking about in relationships, married a good man, and then through the years, all of a sudden she believes he's changed into a narcissistic man and that he gaslights her, which is a projection of our own behavior in the relationship. And the reason we can do that as women is another concept I like to teach and talk about from time to time, which is if you spot it, you got it. So if as a woman, we're in our own delusion that we live in as victims, blaming our husbands in the marriage, we create a lens of projecting our own behaviors onto them. And we'll often tell our husband, you're gaslighting me, when that's the behavior that we are acting out in the relationship because we have it and we know how to do it. And it is a very, very common woman way. So up front, if you are a good man married to a woman, you must know on a spectrum, you are being gaslit by your wife. You have to know that it is happening so that you can catch when it is happening. You don't have the wiring, so gone unnoticed, And happening over an extended period of time is where you lose your sense of self and don't understand what's happening in the relationship. And what you often share with me is you feel like you're going crazy. That's what happens when you don't understand gaslighting and you don't know and see that it's happening. So that's why I want you to pay attention today so you can understand what it is and have that education so that you can see it and know that as your experience, so that you are not sucked in to that vortex that your wife creates in her woman way of gaslighting. So the objective for men today in watching this video is to learn about how your wife gaslights so you can break out of the spell and no longer fall for the emotional abuse of gaslighting. It is a form of emotional abuse. And it's important to know that so that, again, you can see that it's happening and understand what your wife is trying to accomplish through the gaslighting and not get trapped in it. For the women watching, this is really important, and you're likely already triggered and having a hard time hearing me. But if you're a woman who is open-minded and trying to see these issues in yourself, and you resonate with my message, and you're already feeling a resistance or a wall to this topic, pay attention to that, because the objective and purpose for you, and part of the name of the channel, the Red Pill for Women, is to take this red pill truth of your reality and how you show up and operate in these destructive behaviors so that you can see how you gaslight your husband, and for you to know it is a form of emotional abuse. And again, as I often say, not to make you bad and wrong, but to wake you up, just as I had to wake up, just as the women I work with had to wake up. If you deny this in yourself, you will not catch it. You will continue to operate in this destructive, emotionally abusive behavior, and you will not catch yourself. It's important you know unequivocally that you gaslight and not make yourself wrong and bad for it. It's a form of our woman ways that we use to emasculate our husbands. So if you resonate with the woman ways I talk about and all the variations that I teach them, and you know you emasculate, then you can also know that you gaslight for the purpose of being able to catch yourself. If you don't think this is you, you will continue to deny it. You won't catch it. So just as a good man has to be clear and know this is happening in his marriage, you have to be crystal clear that you are doing it as a form of one of your woman ways. And I want to normalize, meaning to see this as a common behavior that every woman married to a good man does. So we don't make it so big and scary to see. It is very destructive and dark. But if we make it a big deal or a non-normative behavior, we won't see it. And that's been a really, really important part of my journey, which I want to share a little of my experience, because I had to go through the same as you. For the women who are open-minded and hearing me and my message, I had to be red-pilled too. I had to do the same thing that you are doing to see these woman ways in myself. And this was really difficult for me to expose in myself and see, because I did not want to know myself as someone who was capable of gaslighting, because psychology and our society has made gaslighting a trait and a symptom essentially of a sociopath and a very mentally disturbed, unwell person. And I'm teaching this as, no, it's a universal woman behavior that we have to a good man, so that we don't make it scary and inaccessible to see in ourselves, so that we can stop this. So of all the woman ways I've had to see about myself, this was the most difficult to see and know about myself because, one, it was so deeply ingrained in how I operated, not only in my marriage, but past relationships with men and even growing up with my dad. Second, because it is such a dark aspect of our wiring and the behaviors we have as a woman. So I share my experience as a way to take it from seeming so big and dark and overwhelming to seeing it as this is part of our behavior we have to accept and know. So it's easier to cross that bridge and see that in ourselves. So I actually have some old work that I did about seeing myself as gaslighting in my marriage. And I want to share this so that as a woman watching and as the men listening, men can know this experience of what's happening in their marriage. And hopefully this will help some women to see and know this in themselves, because that's the first step to seeing it. I cannot heal what I deny. So here's me and my experience of how I knew myself in gaslighting in my marriage. I control the narrative of the reality. I create a narrative that denies any other perspective. I shut down any perspective that does not align with my story or way of thinking. I deny my husband any independent thoughts or feeling. I train him to be obedient to me. I groom him on how to think, feel, and behave. I punish him and push him into a corner so he must bow to me. I make him think he is going crazy. So I know many men can relate to the experience of this being done to you in your marriage. And again, I'm very hopeful that me sharing my experience and what I've had to see about myself helps other women to open up and see this destructive behavior in yourself again, so that you can change and be the wife and woman that your husband deserves and that you deserve for yourself. The next place I would like to go in this, after sharing my experience and kind of setting up the purpose of what I hope women and good men will get out of this and talk, is really looking at, okay, what is gaslighting? What is gaslighting? Because again, for men, it's very difficult to understand because you don't have it. Good men don't have this trait or characteristic. And it doesn't mean that good men don't have flaws or make mistakes or have issues or problems, but this is not one of them. And if you are a good man and your wife has made you believe that you gaslight, this will be a good video to break out of that brainwashing. So I have found a definition that does a really good job of simply describing what gaslighting is. I have changed some of the words to be aligned with marriages and the dynamics between women and good men. And I'm going to read it twice. So this is what gaslighting is. Gaslighting is the psychological manipulation of a good man over an extended period of time that causes him to question the validity of his own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories, and leads to confusion, loss of confidence and self-esteem, uncertainty of his emotional or mental stability, and a dependency on the perpetrator, his wife. I'm going to read that one more time. Gaslighting is the psychological manipulation of a good man over an extended period of time that causes him to question the validity of his own thoughts, perception of reality or memories, and leads to confusion, loss of confidence and self-esteem, uncertainty of his emotional or mental stability, and a dependency on the perpetrator, his wife. More simply put, gaslighting is a psychological tool to manipulate your mind to conform to your wife's reality that fits her projection of you. A psychological tool to manipulate your mind to conform to your wife's reality that fits her projection of you. The primary mechanism and tool that we use as women in a marriage or relationship to a good man of gaslighting is shaming. And the purpose of shaming, and for the men listening, why your wife shames you, and the women listening, why you shame your husband, is to make him feel broken and flawed at the very essence of who he is. The purpose and the primary tool of gaslighting is shaming, which is to make a good man feel broken and flawed at the very essence of who he is. So why? Why as women do we do this? And what's going on inside of us that this is how we are operating in our marriage? So gaslighting is created in a marriage when we live in camp victim. And the reason for that is in camp victim, when we've put the responsibility of our experience outside of us onto our husbands, onto circumstances, onto our past, avoiding any accountability or responsibility of how we are creating our experience. In camp victim, as women, we live in an altered reality. And in the context of marriage, believing that our husbands are our perpetrator and the source of our own brokenness. The reason we want to shame our husbands and gaslight them to believe that they are the problem and they are the source of our unhappiness is because fundamentally as women, we feel deeply, deeply flawed and deeply broken within ourselves. Some women are very aware of that brokenness that they experience and feel in themselves. Some women are able to live in a facade that they present to the world and they also buy into within themselves and suppress and avoid the brokenness they feel within themselves. But if we slow down and we are deeply honest with ourselves, we know that we experience this sense of brokenness within us. And we don't want to face that because it's very vulnerable and very exposing, which is why we create this altered reality and camp victim to put the experience of ourselves outside of us, and in this case, onto our husbands in the marriage. Living in camp victim, we weave a story, even underneath the blaming our husbands for our brokenness. Underneath that, in that victim story we have woven, is we believe men have been the cause of our brokenness throughout our whole life. So oftentimes that blame goes towards our dad or other men in our lives. As we get older, the men that we've been in relationships with where we've gotten our hearts broken, which is a part of life. So we have a deeply ingrained story that men are responsible for our brokenness. And when we have that underlying woven story living in camp victim, we naturally bring that into our marriages, and that blame gets shifted onto our husbands that they are the cause of our brokenness, which then we project outward. And a good man is so susceptible and vulnerable to that gaslighting that he doubts his own perception of reality and buys into the story and the gaslighting that has happened at the hands of his wife, that he is the problem and that he is broken and deeply flawed. And that allows us to avoid any accountability as women of how we feel about ourselves and what's happening internally that is ours to heal and overcome. That nothing our husbands do or fix or change will heal that brokenness within us. The next place I would like to go in talking about gaslighting today and helping men understand what's going on in their wife's mind and helping women to understand so that we can wake up and change is 5 ways that your wife gaslights you. Again, to help men see it because it's very difficult to see. And as we get into this, reminding you that the purpose of gaslighting is to doubt your own reality, what you know to be true, and doubt the reality of your wife and your marriage and your perception of what is happening. The mechanism of gaslighting that your wife uses manipulates you into believing that you are the problem and you are the source of her unhappiness. And in that, it's really important to remember, just a simple reminder, it's important to know that in spite of your wife's facade when you met and how she presented herself as happy, it is important that you remember she was unhappy when she got married. The unhappiness never went away, but the facade, she could not keep up, and she had to create a reality of what has caused her to be unhappy. And so gaslighting is one of the tools she uses to validate her internal experience of unhappiness and how you have caused it. So as I go through these 5 ways that your wife gaslights you, if this is you, you must know that your experience is because you've been gaslit. If you are a good man and you are experiencing any one of these, it is because you have been gaslit. And again, shaming is the primary mechanism of gaslighting to make you feel broken and flawed at the very essence of who you are. You don't need to know all the hows and mechanisms because we have a bag full of mechanisms to do this. So I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of those. Just that your wife is gaslighting you, and here are 5 ways to know so that you can see the reality and break out of the delusion that happens when she's causing you to believe that these things are true. So number 1 of how you can know your wife is gaslighting you is, as a good man, knowing that you are successful and capable at work and your life outside of your marriage. Yet at home, your wife has made you feel incompetent in your role as a husband and a father. How good men experience this is that nothing you do is right. Nothing you do is right. Nothing you do is ever enough. It never fixes anything. Gaslighting is the psychological tool that has convinced you that you can't do anything right at home, and that you are a failure as a man at home. You want to know this so that you understand gaslighting is the reason you are doubting your reality, that you are a capable, responsible adult in the context of being home and in your marriage. Number 2 of how you can know you have been gaslit, you have forgotten that you are a good man. You have forgotten that you are a good man with integrity and morals. In this, your wife has convinced you that the behaviors in your marriage are characteristic of not being a good person, and that you are at fault for the problems and the dysfunction in the marriage. Gaslighting is what she uses to make you believe that this is true, so that you doubt your own reality, that you are good-natured, good-hearted, fair, and genuine. Number 3, the good-natured man you are has been exploited to convince you that your wife is unsafe and may be in an abusive relationship. I'm going to repeat that one. The good-natured man you are has been exploited to convince you that your wife is unsafe and may be in an abusive relationship. How this occurs in the gaslighting is that your wife has poked you and provoked you to be quick to anger and have aggressive behavior. And in that, often wants you to get counseling or help for anger management. The men suffering in this way have a very difficult time understanding because outside the marriage and in life, they are not aggressive or quick to anger, are emotionally controlled within themselves, but their wives gaslight them to believe that they are an aggressive, angry, uncontrolled man who needs help. Gaslighting is what she uses to make you believe this is true, so you doubt your own reality and experience of yourself, that you are a gentleman who is emotionally controlled within himself. The fourth way your wife gaslights you, she turns your parenting style of consequences and discipline as inappropriate and harmful. In this one, she will turn the children against you and create an environment where you are the bad guy and often make your children afraid of you. Gaslighting is what she uses to accomplish this objective, so that you doubt your own reality, that you are a good father who loves his children, wants the best for them, and is trying to teach them how life works. And number 5, you are made to feel wrong for your desire for regular, engaged sex. Your wife gaslights you to make you feel wrong for your desire for regular, engaged sex. She makes you believe that your desires for sex are Neanderthal-like and that you are undesirable. And then she also gaslights you to believe it's okay for her not to want to have sex, or that sex isn't something you continue in a marriage. You reach an age and life is busy and life goes on, and makes you believe it's okay that she's disengaged and doesn't want sex anymore, and that is perfectly normal. She uses gaslighting to make you doubt your own reality and what you know to be true, that sex is a healthy, normal part of a marriage, and that your wife has a responsibility in her commitment and in being a wife to stay engaged with sex. So those are the 5 ways your wife gaslights you. If any of these are true, and there are many more, these are the most common that I discuss with good men of their experience in their marriages. And if any of these 5 are true, you can know you are being gaslit by your wife, and not to be a victim, but to understand the reality of what is happening. So again, you are not sucked in to the vortex of crazy making that is happening as your wife makes you believe these things are true. If you are a good man and you've lost sight of those qualities in yourself, and you have begun to act out of character of your integrity and morals, then that is another sign of being gaslit in your marriage. So in getting into the solution for this very destructive behavior that is sadly very common in everyday normal marriages, I want to talk to women first. So good for you if you listen to this and you're a woman and you can see yourself in these behaviors and see yourself in how you operate in your marriage and gaslighting your husband. That takes a lot of courage, a lot of vulnerability, a lot of bravery to go there. As I talked about in the beginning, it's very difficult to see because gaslighting is seen as a very uncommon trait of someone who is very mentally unwell. To recognize this is part of our woman ways. So good for you if you've been open to see it, because that is step 1 in the solution. You have to take the red pill to know this is you and that this is a woman way that you have. Then step 2 is understanding gaslighting happens because we live in camp victim. We are entrenched in a reality believing that things are happening to us, that our experience of ourselves, the experience of our life, the experience of our marriage is out of our control, which creates a projection of the internal experience of ourselves onto our husbands and our marriages. And what's interesting is that many of the women who will watch or listen to this will say, this is what my husband does to me. And if you are married to a good man, then again, that is a projection so that you can continue to deny your own experience and not have to look at yourself and take accountability. You can stay in the trap of blaming your husband. So the solution is you have to get into Camp Take Responsibility to know that this is you so that you can break out of it and begin to see your husband as the good man you married. He's right there waiting for you. And sadly, we will use a good man's responses to our tools of emasculation like gaslighting to continue to point the finger and use his reactions to what is happening as our ammo and weave our story of how awful they are and how they are the problem and the sole problem in the marriage. So when you get into Camp Take Responsibility, this is me. How am I creating the issues and problems in the marriage? Because good men don't want problems in the marriage. They want the problems solved and fixed because they just want you to be happy. So we have to see as women, we are the problem in a marriage or relationship with a good man so we can be our own solution to see how we are showing up that's creating the issues and problems. And then our good man will be right there waiting for us. And we will experience all the wonderful qualities of a healthy, loving marriage. And when you move to Camp Take Responsibility, you work on your behaviors to change them so you can feel good about yourself and be the good wife your husband deserves and that you deserve to be for yourself and that you can be proud of yourself. And then men, the solution for men. You can't get stuck in camp victim of this is happening to me. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it is okay. But as I've been talking about today, this is a common experience in normal marriages on a spectrum. And most men are going to be experiencing this in the middle to the low end of the spectrum. So it's critical to see this as a reality in your marriage so you can break out of the mind games with your wife and see you are not the problem. So you don't get sucked into that vortex because it is a mind control technique. Gaslighting is a mind control technique that once you see it, you can stop being sucked into your wife's reality and stop doubting the truth of who you are as a good man. That you have to be willing to see what's the weakness in me, not making yourself bad or wrong. What is the weakness in me that I am so susceptible to being sucked into this crazy making? So you find a strength and solidness in yourself that it can't happen. It's not your fault that your wife behaves in this way. It is simply a woman way. So you have to see, I didn't marry the wrong woman. I married a woman. And this is part of what happens in a marriage on a spectrum so that you can navigate it in a constructive way and for you to be in Camp Take Responsibility so you can take back the power you've unknowingly given away to your wife and rebuild your confidence and inner strength. The reality is that in spite of these issues and challenges that we bring into a marriage as a woman with a good man, and this is 90% of what I hear from the men who reach out to me or that I get the chance to meet with, is they see everything I'm talking about. They understand it's happening in their marriage. And one, they still want to continue to try to help and support their wife. And the fascinating part is, yes, they want the marriage to be better and they want the problem solved. But they want their wives to be able to see this and change for her own benefit, because they begin to see how unhappy she is and how badly she must feel on the inside. And they're seeking support and help for her, not for their own benefit. They know that can be a part of it, and they happily welcome that, but because they care so much about their wife and want her to get the help she needs. So that's one amazing trait of a good man. The second, in spite of him seeing the issues and challenges that I talk about on the channel and seeing them happening in his marriage and what his wife is doing, they still love and adore their wives and still see all the good things. Because in general, in a common, normal, everyday marriage, if things aren't too far gone, there's still a lot of good things. And that's what a good man focuses on, because that's his core as a good man, is he's good natured and he wants to stay focused on the positive things and the good things. And then the third of what's amazing when a good man sees what's happening in his marriage and the reality of his wife as a woman is he's still committed to his vows and has integrity and values he wants to uphold to make the marriage work the best he can. And then some men, which understandable, and they might take this path too, which is valid, that they see these behaviors, and if she's not going to change, it's better that we not be together. Either of those paths is valid, but if you take the path of, I don't want to continue in my relationship with my wife, I want to get a divorce, you want to be doing that from camp take responsibility, not camp victim, because you will end up jaded, angry, and bitter. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. If you haven't, go check me out on YouTube, Rumble, and X. You can find the links in the description below to connect with me there. For those women listening who know you are the problem and want a path forward to take responsibility and change your own inner turmoil and unhappiness, I have a course for women called the Happiness Program, which is the solution to the unhealthy relationship you have with yourself and the issues and challenges you have in your life and your marriage. You can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. And for the good men listening who want a solution to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to your wife, I have a course for you too called the Marriage Rescue Course for Good Men Only, that teaches you how to rebuild your strength and confidence as a good man so that you can navigate the relationship with your wife in a healthy, constructive way. Again, you can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to talking with you soon.